Welcome back to the Top Notch Documentaries YouTube channel. In this Israel Keys video, I'll be delving into the theory surrounding Israel Keys having more than 11 victims. I hope you enjoy. The theory that Keys had more than 11 victims is widely speculated given the 14-year time frame that Keys gave for being active when it came to kidnapping and murdering people. What surprised me was that Keys never admitted to killing 11 people, but the FBI were either using it as a marker or fixated on the number as being the total victim count. They spent time interrogating Keys, trying to negotiate some type of deal with him. They constantly made statements like less than a dozen, or queried Keys on criminal activity, like asking him, did you rob more or less than a dozen banks, less than a dozen caches? The FBI stuck with the random number 11, and it would seem unlikely that the number correlates to the total number of victims. It was plucked out of a case that I'll get to in a minute. Keys would go along with this less than a dozen idea, knowing that he could use it to his advantage. If he had more than 11, then he'd be able to leave out victims that he didn't want to speak about. The number 11's origins likely came from another case that was mentioned during one of the interrogations. Keys wanted to know about other cases where the federal death penalty could be applied. The only case that was somewhat relevant at the time was the case of Kobani Savage, a gang leader and drug dealer out of Philadelphia. He had been involved in 12 murders, and some of these had been orchestrated while Savage sat behind bars. He was the first person in Philadelphia to receive the federal death penalty in modern times, and the case was active during the time that Keys was awaiting his own trial. Keys made the comment that the case was to do with organised crime, and it must have been tricky for the investigators because there weren't any cases that matched what Keys had done, and if there had have been, they likely wouldn't have fallen under state crimes rather than federal, since most serial murder cases are state-level crimes. So, this brings me back to Keys and the theory that he had more victims. He knew that his computer was the key to solving his murders as well as other crimes, and made the comment that they begin to connect the dots eventually. Either Keys was going to give them 11 victims, since that was the number that the FBI was running with, or because that was the number of victims that were on his computer. And I don't buy that second point, because his computer contained thousands of photographs of missing people, and Keys followed victim information updates over the years. So, it is safe to assume that more than 11 of his victims' names were on his computer, but he was only willing to talk about 11 of them. It was the bare minimum that he'd be able to hand over in exchange for the death penalty. He had gotten rid of his old computer the previous year, which apparently contained more information of his crimes. But, if his newest computer contained this many images of missing people, then wouldn't he have searched up the same victim names on both of his computers? He wasn't planning on being caught after all. Whilst reading the book Dark Dreams, and be sure to check out my video on that and how it influenced Israel Keys, I picked up on an interesting point, and it relates to Keys. It mentioned the point that you can never trust what a sexual predator says, because they always lie, and Keys would presumably fit into this category. If he claimed to have lied to everyone remotely close to him over the 14-year murder spree, then why would he suddenly stop lying once confronted by the FBI questioning? It wouldn't make any sense that he would come out with his exact victim count because he was playing his cards close to his chest. Plus, he was concerned about the future of his daughter. He was quoted as saying that providing new victim names wouldn't benefit him. That's just one more thing my kid has to live with when she grows up. Evidently, there was no incentive to him providing new victim names. This wasn't on his mind. The only victims that he wanted to speak on were already on his computer. If he could give the bare minimum and achieve his end goal, then that was the top priority for him. Like with many other serial killers, the true victim number is rarely revealed. If a murder doesn't go according to the killer's plan, and if a situation doesn't work out, the killer is less likely to want to speak on the situation and may not even want to take credit for the crime. And Keys is unlikely to be any different. An example of murders not going according to plan were the Courier murders in 2011. Keys claimed to have been seeking a lone man but ended up going after a couple in their home. The couple fought back the entire night and refused to obey orders. Despite Keys claiming the night to have been a good one and that he had everything on that one, the couple's resistance was unexpected and angered Keys considerably. Keys knew that the case was on his computer and that it would be eventually tied back to him, and so he was open to confessing to move closer to his death penalty outcome. If it hadn't have been on his computer, it doesn't appear like he would have wanted to have talked about it. It didn't play along with his fantasy of taking a couple, despite him claiming to have already murdered a couple, and he didn't seem proud of the crime. Keys' other couple murder didn't sound like it went according to plan either. He claimed to have accidentally murdered a man with a shovel, likely because he was trying to save his partner. True, it mirrors the Courier murders, and the names of those two people are likely also on his computer. And don't forget, Keys claiming to be open to killing another couple following the Courier murder. He claimed that he wanted to use his silencer again, but I think that it's deeper than that. He had no control over the Couriers, and so had monitored a just married couple in New Hampshire, eager to go ahead with a plan that went his way. Fortunately, if true, a park ranger being present in the woods flipped Keys back down to reality, and he didn't go ahead with this. So, we know that serial killers are mostly serial liars and are less likely to want to speak on their failed murder fantasies unless they can gain something from doing so. So if Keys had murdered more people and the crimes hadn't gone right, or he wasn't proud of them, then would he have not bothered to have searched up their names? It appears likely. If victims had been prostitutes, had never been reported missing, or had been from other countries, then Keys may have not even known their names, or come to the realisation that their disappearances wouldn't have gained much media attention. So why bother searching them up? He made the comment that Canadians don't count and had travelled to different countries over the years. Therefore, you can't rule them out. In my opinion, Keys had more than 11 victims. I don't believe that it was close to Ted Bundy in terms of victim count, but I do believe that the number is somewhere between 11 and 20. Keys knew what victims were on his computer, and so those are more than likely his most memorable and treasured victims. I feel like most, if not all of his most treasured victims were on his computer. He could give a confession and play into the idea that there were only 11 and he wouldn't have to speak on anything that he didn't want to. He had all the information after all. The fact that Keys appears to attempt to murder more people following his murders, plus his travelling, just makes 11 sound way too low for someone who claimed to have little self-control and such a strong compulsion to take innocent lives. This has been the theory that Keys had more than 11 victims. Leave your thoughts in the comments box below. As always, thank you for watching.